Hello, beautiful people of the center. Hi. As you heard from our host, Reed Dickinson, we're continuing in our theme, One Truth, Many Paths. And this month's recommended reading, what a good one, by Matthew Fox. It's very similar in the title, One River, Many Wells. Oh, the focus of this book is deep ecumenicism. And he really takes the word ecumenical beyond the more common use of it. You know, like an ecumenical picnic would be a picnic among all the Christian churches. It usually means a collaboration among Christian churches. Now, he goes much further. Like it says on the cover, Matthew Fox brings readers into the common heart of the religions of the world. One heart, one path. Many paths, one truth. And he's been described as a maverick for doing this. And I don't find him so much to be a maverick as a hero, because I'm loving what I'm reading about this common heart experience at the center of all religions. And he calls it the river that we all draw from. And the wells that we use to get to that river, these are our different traditions and our different beliefs. I love this image of one river, this sort of underground source of water serving all the various communities on the surface. And I know most wells don't actually get their water from an underground river. It's more like there are these layers of rock and soil, and water is sort of oozing, flowing through the small spaces between all of the matter. And where that water is, that's called aquifers, I believe. And the movement through those aquifers is gentle, seeping, slow, and sometimes water from aquifers can take anything from years to centuries to get to where they're going. And the beauty of having a well is that ideally, if a region experiences a particularly dry season for a few weeks, the well will not immediately dry up because it isn't dependent on outer circumstances. It is sourced by something more ancient and more still, more quiet. How about that? Yeah. And the idea is that if you dig a hole in the ground deep enough so that it goes below the water table, then eventually the water in the wetness around that hole, in the earth around the hole, it will be pulled by gravity into the empty space you've created and will fill up in the bottom of the hole. But the water will fill up only to the level of the water table, because that's how gravity works. And for water to go higher up in your well now that you've made, now you need an upward flow. And gravity doesn't work like that. So now you have to have a device, a practice that reaches to where the deepness is and retrieves the water on a regular, consistent basis. So in other words, a well is simply a deep enough hole that it reaches the water source. Think of that as your religion. But to retrieve the water, now you need a system. You need a pump. You need a windmill. You need a bucket on a rope. Think of that as your practice. Oh, it's a wonderful thing to know that there is a water table below the surface of things. And it's a wonderful thing to have a well that reaches it. But if you don't have a pump, or if you do have a pump and you don't use it, it's like having a religion and not practicing it. It is said, they say, spiritual people, they know. Spiritual people know that there is water below. Yet not all spiritual people do anything with that knowledge, other than think about it now and then. So some might say, I'm Christian, or I'm Jewish, or I'm Hindu, or I'm a religious scientist, but I don't pump at the well. And if I don't pump at the well, does it make any difference at all what label I claim? You know that old joke that says, if it were against the law for you to practice this teaching at the Center for Spiritual Living, would there be enough evidence to convict you? Oh, but some people do pump. Some people do. Some people practice. They do practice. You can feel it. You can feel it in them because they are changed by their practice. So, and what is a practice? Well, a practice is that thing that you do, that the more you do it, the better you become at doing it. It is that thing that you do, that the more that you do it, the deeper it reaches. A practice is that thing that you do that has a regular time slot in your life, that is more present in you than I think about it now and then. A practice is that thing that you do that defines you, that shapes you, that connects you, that redeems you, that restores you. It is your sanctuary, it is your refuge, it is your safe house, it is where you go to rest and renew. While I was away, I read an article about some of the best presenters and teachers and how they have the most boring lives because of the schedules they keep. Because they've got routines that feed their excellence. One, for example, has a daily 3-hour writing session to fuel his creativity. Another interrupts his day at the same time every single day to walk around a certain lake. Another one has 4 15-minute meditation slots that everything else has to schedule around. And they are religious about keeping their commitments. It's their practice. And they have surrendered to the ritual of it. And in so doing, they're letting the regularity of the repetition work itself deep into them. Their practice is as constant as the northern star. I was lucky to be able to study music when I was younger, and languages too. Wonderful. But it's not easy at first. Like with music, you want to play beautiful music. In the beginning, it's all hard work. Like languages, you're called to this vision to speak in soaring sentences, but in the beginning, you have to learn how to say the cat sat on the mat. And the trick is, you've got to stick with it. You have to stay the distance. Because the deepness comes just past that point where it's boring. Just on the other side of the place where you want to quit. The deepness comes right at that place where you surrender and you yield to the discipline of routine. And you stay with it through the part where it's no longer entertaining you. And you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, but you keep going on. Like learning an instrument, or learning a language, or mastering a sport. They all have in them drills. The doing of something over and over and over and over again. And I remember when I was studying music, the drills. Sometimes they seem soulless and boring. And yet, Anyone who has mastered any discipline like that, whether it's a sport or an art or poetry or music, anyone who has mastered, they know that mastery comes from disciplined practice. They know that they cannot do extraordinary things with ordinary practice. They know that they cannot take their art to the next highest level by staying in the realm of part-time amateur. And when a person does cross over to that land of deep practice, then it seems less important what their instrument or language or sport or discipline is. Because when a person does cross over into that land of deep practice, there is a commonality of experience in which deep can speak to deep. Ecumenical. He talks about it so beautifully in this book, reaching to the Buddhist tradition. This is Thich Nhat Hanh speaking about the centrality of going deep if we are to do ecumenicism. Through the practice of deep looking and deep listening, we become free, able to see the beauty and values in our own and others' tradition. And then Fox goes on to say, yet to get to the point of seeing the beauty and value in others' tradition, one must look and listen deeply into one's own. One must practice some path along the journey that leads to depth. One must enter the well of mystical experience. Otherwise, we may end up having many shallow wells, none of them truly able to water us. Nothing wrong with having a variety of interests or being fascinated by the diversity of spiritual opportunity available to us in these days. But for me, I want there to be somewhere in my life a place where I drop a bucket down deep with my practice. I think what the author may be saying is that it doesn't really matter. It matters less what religion, what well you choose, than it does that you do it, that the sincerity and the consistency is what reaches for the deep than the outer form. I just returned from a month in Bali and I was taking travelers around. We were visiting carving artisans, cooperatives, and since I've been there a couple of times, sometimes I just stand around while the guests look around at all the artists and I speak to the staff. And one of the staff members at this carving cooperative was moved by the way we interacted with each other. And standing next to me said, "What kind of group are you?" And I said, "Well, we study, we're sort of like pilgrims. Every day we chant the Gayatri mantra. Every day we do gentle yoga. Every day we discuss spirituality, and then we go and visit Hindu temples to engage in the Hindu-style Balinese prayer." And he looked at me and said, that's inspiring, you know. Very few of my friends do that anymore. And he's Hindu. So I said, "Do you?" And he said, I used to. And I said, "And?" And he said, "And I was a better person when I did that." And I said, "And? What happened?" And he said, "And I forgot." So touching. Well, when we are on the spiritual pilgrimage, we do engage as a group in practice. Like I said, 108 recitations every day of one of the world's most ancient prayers. And what I do after I've taught the group how to do it, I take the beads that we use to count the prayers and I offer it to someone else in the group so that they can become the custodian of the practice. And they take with them the responsibility then to show up early the next day, to make sure the chairs are in place, to recruit and train their successor to start the practice, to conduct it 3 alms, 108 recitations, and to close with 3 alms. It's a simple enough daily spiritual ritual that, if engaged in without any fanfare, produces deep community. Over the years that I've been doing this, however, I noticed something about we who call ourselves members of the Center for Spiritual Living. We have a personality profile. We can't leave a thing alone. We have to customize it. We have to bring our personality. We have to put the stamp of our personal flair on it. We've got to put the stamp of me on the practice. So over time, people have said things like, I'd like to bring my favorite music to play in the background, or I'd like to have people do some breathing before and after, or I'd like to do a spiritual mind treatment at the end, or I'd like to do this or do that or whatever it is. And all of them are lovely and valid additions. And yet I notice at the same time that the practice by itself doesn't require anything added to it at all for it to reach deep. It only needs to be done. Quite simple. Do it. Just do it. Show up is part of the doing it. 3 alms, 108 recitations, 3 alms. And when you yield to the simplicity of that, or whatever it is that you're doing without elaboration, it reaches the water table. It's the pump. Oh, and you can trust that practice. And when you do, you can feel the ancientness of it and its power. I think that's the power of the Catholic Mass, actually. That it's the same everywhere. I remember once visiting Turkey, in Ephesus, the hills above Ephesus, the place where Mary, Jesus' mother, was said to have spent her final days. In her house, where they've rebuilt from the foundation a chapel where Mass is performed by volunteer clergy from all over the world. And as a result of them coming from wherever they are, the Mass is being conducted in different languages simultaneously. But it doesn't matter that everybody's speaking different language, because everyone there knows what is happening and when to do what and what it means. Oh, so it moves like a tide, like an ocean, powerful and solid, like seeping water. Oh, there was something so beautiful about that visit. The pilgrims in attendance at the Mass were from all different religions. There were Christians, there were Hindus, and there were Muslims, and there were people like me. And what struck me even more than the diversity of the visitors in the audience was the singleness of the awe and reverence with which people participated in this ancient custom. It didn't seem to matter what label they had claimed on their packages, because everyone was there for the same river. He quotes mystics to illustrate throughout the book. The Indian mystic Kabir sings, "Neither a Hindu nor a Muslim am I. A mere ensemble of 5 elements is this body, where the spirit plays its drama of joy and suffering. The God of Hindus resides in a temple. The God of Muslims resides in a mosque. Who resides there where there are no temples, no mosques?" I witnessed this And something similar to the Mass in Turkey, I witnessed the same thing in Indonesia and Bali, where I was visiting a temple that was built in the ocean above a freshwater spring that has sprung up in the ocean bed. And every day at this spring in the ocean, Hindu priests bless thousands and thousands of visitors who come from every faith and come from every country to receive the deep blessing from the one well. It's so amazing to witness, to see Hindus in sarongs, Muslims in hijab, Christians in jeans, tourists with cameras, all of them lining up with excitement, with respect, with hope, with awe, with love, helping each other through the waves across the slippery rocks of the ocean floor to the one well. It's amazing to see. And I know not everyone there is having the same ecstatic experience that I'm describing of oneness. Sometimes I see people standing apart, looking, almost as if they are detached. I don't know what their experience is, but it does remind me that I am the one who is responsible for bringing the awe and the amazement and the appreciation of oneness to the event. I see that variety of experience. For some people, what they're seeing is just an ordinary pile of rocks over a spring. That's their lens. For others, they are seeing something extraordinary that is transporting them. That's their lens. And they are both correct. I was remembering that as I read in the book that religions are integral to creation because they are themselves created. In other words, we are making it all up. Set up by humans in relationship to their stories of the divine. In addition, religions provide us with a perspective, a lens through which we see creation and interpret it. My practice is my lens, and it affects the way I experience whatever it is I'm doing. That's a beautiful question to work with. How does my practice affect the way I interpret my world? What do I bring to my world as a result? Because we make it up, right? I was remembering this talent we have to creatively make the world up around us. When I worked in Hollywood for a while, and I got into an elevator to go to my office, and Steve Martin walked into the elevator. And I suddenly became awestruck. This was one of my heroes, in the movie world at least. And he asked me something, and this is how I answered. He stepped into the elevator and I put on a lens, because I had to ask myself, did he bring the awe and wonder of the experience with him into the elevator, or did I put on that lens? If I didn't know who he was, would I have felt that way? I came to the experience and produced it. It reminded me, of that part in the Bhagavad Gita where the Prince Arjuna says to God, Krishna, I want to see you in your absolute form. And God says, it cannot be done with ordinary eyes. You have to look with divine vision. You have to put on the lens of what it is you want to see. And I prepare the travelers on the trip before we visit our first ancient temple to put on the lens. I tell them, you can be like a tourist who comes for the photo and sees another pile of ancient rocks. Or you can be like a person in the elevator who decides when to put on the lens of awe and be dumbstruck. In other words, bring the holiness, and I notice that it becomes progressively easier to do that when I'm practicing deepness. So I'm asking, what does my practice do for me? Well, for me, it brings up the water that hydrates me and keeps me alive and happy. Oh, it's so good to be home. So happy to be home. And you know, one of the first things I notice every time I come home is that I have to keep hydrated and happy so that I don't forget, like the young man at the carving cooperative, and I don't forget and become progressively more loyal to routines that deplete and disconnect me. Oh, it's so good to be home. And as soon as I come back, one of the first things I notice quite sharply is that we appear to have so much more than so many people in the world, and at the same time we seem to be so much more dissatisfied. I mean, people simply just don't smile as much here. And it begs the question in me, what are we practicing that produces that? And as I read through this beautiful book, One River, Many Wells, where Matthew Fox is talking about ecumenicism and our shared relationship through the fact of creation, he's helping me ask the question over and over again, what does my practice produce in my life, and how is it showing up on my face? Or in my choices? Or through my personality? Or how I talk about other people, or how I handle relationships, or do business, or eat. And the book is peppered with spiritual poetry to drive the points home, like this beautiful one from Hafiz. What do sad people have in common? It seems they have all built a shrine to the past and often go there and do a strange wail and worship. What is the beginning of happiness? It is to stop being so religious like that. I love that. It's helping me to ask the question, what am I practicing? And if what I am practicing is not deepening me into kindness and inner peace and appreciation of diversity and honesty and awe, then, and I believe the author suggests this in the book, he says, then maybe you ought to, he's telling us, spend more time with your practice. Or find another one that will. So, I'm imagining you and I challenging ourselves to deepen our practice. For example, look for every free meditation opportunity at the center and go to every single one of them for the whole month. You want deep? Or get the recommended book and read all the chapters assigned to every single week in your own schedule so that you have a regular date with yourself. Or whatever it is. A deep yielding to a practice. Ooh. Imagine. I invite you to breathe in with me and exhale, letting your eyes close as you remember with me the words of the opening. I see many expressions of thought in the world, and yet I know they are all from one source. And so we take this moment in community prayer to look into that one source, which is the deep, still presence that was always present. in this inner observation, we affirm our faith that in this stillness we are one, that we share one sacred life, that we are the infinite in expression. And we let that observation renew us and restore us and position us to interact in the world with grace, with a heart of help and a mind of creativity. And we give thanks for the time in inner contemplation and what it produces in us as we move forward with our lives. And so it is.